A homecoming in Idaho for newly freed hostage Jesse Turner. And a rally for peace in Israel as the Madrid conference draws near. This is the CBS Evening News. Bob Schieffer reporting. Good evening. After more than 4.5 years as a hostage in Lebanon, Jesse Turner is back home again in Idaho, safe at last and ready to start forgetting. Ron Allen has the story.
Today, Jesse John Turner and his family share a new appreciation for life's simple moments.
I think he's just going to stay around close to home and relax and rest and enjoy his family.
Turner completed the long journey back to Boise, his hometown, last night and arrived at the Idaho State Capitol for a hero's welcome.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome, here he is, Jesse John Turner and his family.
Nearly 1,000 people were waiting in the windy, chilly, rainy night to greet Turner, his wife Bader, and their 4-year-old daughter Joanne, who Turner just met. The townspeople had maintained a vigil for nearly 5 years, hoping their native son would come home.
Along with your family members, we never gave up hope. We prayed for your safe return, and our prayers were answered.
Turner's mother, Estelle Ronnyberg, and stepfather Eugene were there too, anxious to finally spend time with their son. They'd been barred from seeing him by U.S. officials for videotaping the family reunion in Germany and sharing it with CBS News.
Alan Steen, Terry A. Anderson,
Prayers and moments of silence were offered for the 4 Americans still held hostage.
Thomas Sutherland, and Joseph James Sicipio.
And finally, as the hour approached midnight, Turner stepped forward with these few words.
It's cold. So all I want to say is thank you. Thanks for everything.
And with that, Turner and his family headed home. He has told them he just wants to forget the years in captivity, not even talk about it, and start a new life. Ron Allen, CBS News, Los Angeles.
In Amman, King Hussein met today with the joint Jordanian-Palestinian delegation to next week's peace talks in Madrid. 2 members of the Jordanian team were born in Jerusalem. Israel has said it would refuse to talk with the Palestinian team if any of its members were from Jerusalem. Israelis who want their hardline prime minister to be flexible in Madrid took to the streets tonight to let their feelings be heard. Bert Quint now with that.
That's the message thousands of Israelis sent their country's delegation to Madrid tonight. Give peace a chance.
Throughout Israel, people seem to be a lot more enthusiastic about the peace conference than their government is. One opinion poll indicates that more than 8 out of 10 Israelis are prepared to make significant concessions at the bargaining table.
Many of these demonstrators fear their hardline prime minister's decision to personally lead the Israeli delegation at what's supposed to be a meeting of foreign ministers could mean the end of any chance for a compromise. They want him to know they're willing to exchange at least some land for peace.
Peace is more important than land.
Our highest priority is peace. That's the Israel I believe in.
But as the Middle East Conference nears, more Israeli homes are being built in the occupied territories. The government insists that to give up any of this land would leave Israel wide open to an Arab attack that, peace agreement or not, some Israelis fear is bound to come.
They're going to try to pressure us into giving up things that we really can't afford to give up.
But even as the debate goes on, the move to Madrid and the peace conference that took nearly half a century to convene is underway. Bert Quint, CBS News, Tel Aviv.
And with us live now in our CBS News Tel Aviv Bureau, correspondent Bob Simon. Bob, one gets the feeling from here that while the United States seems very happy about all this, but that perhaps some of the participants are not all that happy to be there. Does that seem right to you?
Bob, the Americans wanted this conference to happen, which is why it's happening. None of the governments involved want to go particularly. The Israeli government is afraid, and justifiably afraid, that it's going to come under very heavy pressure, not only from the Arabs, but from the Americans, to do things they really don't want to do, which is to give up large chunks of territory. The Arabs want this territory, but they don't really have much faith that the Americans can deliver. So nobody really wants to go. They're only going because the Americans have ordered it, and the Americans are perceived in all countries around here as the rulers of the Middle East.
Clearly, no one expects this particular conference to solve all the problems of the Middle East, but what do you think will actually come from this, and what can we expect down the road?
Bob, what we are going to see next week in Madrid is a giant photo opportunity, a media circus. The participants, the delegates, will be speaking to the cameras. They'll be speaking to their home constituencies. They'll be seeking to impress public opinion. There will be no negotiations. We will hear tough statements. It will be the overture to an opera which at its best is going to be very long, with many acts and many scene changes and many twists and turns. And if it's not conducted wisely, the stage will be cluttered with a lot of bodies at the end.
How widespread is that peace movement that we saw Bert Quint talking about in the piece just a minute ago? Do you sense that Israelis, the people in the streets, really want their government to be flexible, more flexible than we see it being at this point?
The Israelis want peace. There's no question about that. A vast majority of Israelis would vote for peace, would vote for their government to give up land if they were convinced that it would bring peace. The last war, the Gulf War, was a particularly traumatic one for the Israelis. They couldn't react. They were sitting and being hit. And even though there weren't many casualties, it was a terrible, terrible experience here. But what the Israelis do not see, and what they miss desperately, is the sense that the Arabs are genuinely offering peace. What they crave, and they all speak nostalgically of the days when Sadat came here, they crave to see an Arab leader extending his hand in peace who convinces them that he's really interested. What they see are other Middle Easterners like themselves being led like truculent schoolboys to a meeting, to a conference they don't really want to attend.
All right. Thank you very much, Bob. While the Middle East talks may produce some kind of peace agreement far down the road, countries in the region are busily arming themselves to the teeth in the meantime, and Jim Stewart at the Pentagon has that now.
The thunderous success of American arms in the Persian Gulf War only whetted the appetite of countries in the Middle East for more weapons, and most, like Saudi Arabia, want nothing but the best.
Oh, we got it!
They're now looking to buy top-of-the-line U.S. armor and artillery. In fact, they've already ordered something like 470 M1A2 tanks. It's the top of the line. The U.S. forces don't have them yet. They haven't yet been produced.
When talks open in Madrid next week, it will be against this backdrop of a rejuvenated arms race in the region. Syria has bought Scud missiles from North Korea. Israel is getting Patriot missiles from the U.S. Egypt buys Hawk anti-aircraft missiles. Israel orders advanced F-15s. And Saudi Arabia adds more Patriots to its arsenal.
With the exception of the two superpowers, there are more conventional missiles in the inventories of these countries than anywhere else in the world.
And don't forget the wild card, Iraq, still licking its wounds, but more than capable, as UN inspectors have found, of making super guns and long-range rockets able to reach Israel, whose nuclear stockpile is the envy and great fear of its wary neighbors.
This is the only recourse the Arab states feel they have, is to massively arm with conventional weapons to deter Israeli freedom of action.
But the collapse of the Soviet Union as an arms supplier, coupled with the coming talks in Madrid and the high cost of the best U.S. weaponry, is expected by some to slow down the arms race a bit.
Modern weapons are extremely expensive. So unless someone is going to make them loans or sell them arms on the cheap, which on the whole countries do not do in these day and age, they may want to buy more, but they're not going to be able to.
And since the United States is the world's largest supplier of the most sought-after weapons, the decision over whether to sell them at all, and if so to whom, would appear to rest right here. Jim Stewart, CBS News at the Pentagon.
And still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, the bad economic news keeps chipping away at President Bush's popularity, and boom times for the Beverly Hills pawn shop. Ad hoc financial help for the nouveau broke. Well, there is a lot of money on the line tonight in Florida, $94 million to be exact. And while the state's lottery jackpot is growing, so are its money troubles. Juan Vasquez reports.
With the state lottery ready to give away nearly $100 million today, Florida is once again in the grip of lotto fever.
Oh, yeah. Trip around the world, the first thing I do with my wife.
But behind the excitement surrounding the lottery is an irony that illuminates the real state of the economy here and in many other states. Florida is broke. Florida relies on tourism and sales taxes, but the recession has left the state $600 million short in revenue. The governor has been forced to cut services.
50% of our money is locked up in trust funds that we can't touch, and yet when we have to make cuts, we have to make all those cuts out of education, health services, and public safety.
The governor's solution is to reform the entire tax system. But critics are afraid it's just a cover for higher taxes.
The middle class is getting killed. We are getting killed with taxes. And we're not getting the benefits equivalent to the taxes we pay.
The politicians, primarily the legislators, are afraid of the voters, and they're afraid of the T word, especially coming up on the 92 campaigns.
Taxes.
Taxes.
Meanwhile, as the budget crisis deepens, people keep buying lotto tickets. Higher taxes may be a nightmare, but a lottery ticket, that's the stuff dreams are made of. Juan Vasquez, CBS News, Miami.
Well, consumers may be willing to spend $1 for a lottery ticket, but when it comes to the big ticket items like cars, they are not buying these days. Richard Schlesinger now with that story.
When the auto industry looks for the reasons behind its disastrous profit picture, it finds people like Richard Riccardelli. His 1984 Chevette now has 79,000 miles on it. In good times, he'd probably buy a new car.
Everybody wants that new car. And we were planning on getting the new car, and now it's just, like I said, with the economy, especially the income tax. With the income tax, it's like, it's impossible.
Riccardelli and his wife Diana live in Connecticut, which this month started collecting a new state income tax. Money that might go to a new car now goes to the state.
With the income tax, it's an average, probably roughly $75 a week. To us, that's a car payment.
Put the truck back in there.
Across the country, new car sales are being driven downhill towards a new low. The Federal Reserve has eased credit, and manufacturers are trying everything to keep costs down. But sales keep slipping because, say the experts, consumers are squeezed by taxes and scared by layoffs.
When you've got that type of concern, it's very difficult to convince yourself to go out and spend $15,000, $16,000 for a brand new automobile.
That's a nice-looking car, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when consumers finally do decide to try to buy, they face another hurdle. It's the 90s, not the 80s. Banks no longer give loans easily. Dealers can check consumer credit in the showroom, and more frequently, the computer spits out bad news.
Probably close to 80% of the people coming through the showroom door have in some way or another a credit problem.
Either way, we want to show your vehicle.
The experts don't expect things to get better for another year, but the Riccardellis don't need an expert to tell them to stay away from a new car. They look out at their 1984 Chevette, watch the mileage pile up, and say things car dealers hate to hear.
I'm just going to drive it until it's, until I can't drive it anymore like I did with my last car.
Richard Schlesinger, CBS News, New York.
I'm Holazon.
And I'm Harry Smith, tired of being a couch potato?
You may also be a slouch on nutrition. Find out Monday on CBS This Morning.
It's breakfast for your head.
A Gallup poll conducted for Newsweek and released tonight shows that President Bush's approval rating has suddenly slipped from 65 to 55% over the last 2 weeks. The reason? Problems with the economy, the same problem that turned up earlier this week in a CBS News New York Times poll. That is the focus of tonight's Washington Notebook, as a sick economy made Campaign 92 a new ballgame.
This is a time basically to celebrate the end of the two great isms of this century. Nazism and communism have failed.
And this weekend, President Bush is preparing to celebrate another foreign policy triumph, the opening of the Middle East Peace Conference next week in Madrid. It is just the latest overseas success for the Bush administration. The problem is, no matter how many foreign policy triumphs the president seems to score, the economy just gets worse, and even his admirers are getting worried.
If the economy
continues to be bad next year, often the voters hold that against the party in power in the White House.
And that CBS News New York Times poll just underlines how serious the president's problem could be. His 33% approval rating on his handling of the economy is the lowest of any president since Jimmy Carter. What's worse, 3 out of 5 Americans believe the president is devoting too much attention to foreign policy. And when asked who would do a better job handling the economy, Bush or a Democratic president, the Democrat wins 41-35. Those numbers and the outcry from Republicans in recession states has begun to hit home.
I think there's a good deal of realism that has set in at the White House in the last several weeks because we've all communicated our feelings from our states, and I think the president has as much as said so. The question is what to do about it.
The president's friends say there's not much he can do.
Well, the president was handed one of the barrenest plights a president has ever walked into, that is the massive Reagan deficits. And when you have a deficit circumstance, your options are much more extraordinarily limited.
Whatever the case, the gloomy economic news is one obvious reason Mario Cuomo was sounding more like a candidate this week.
I know the Democrats were groping for what kind of an issue to go after George Bush on in 1992. And I think they believe they have found one, the economy. They may have, but that is not necessarily a ticket to success in the fall of 1992.
Maybe not, but pocketbook issues have been powerful in the past, which is one reason why you can find some who say the president's overseas success could actually play against him in 92.
By concentrating so much on foreign policy, he's been an incomplete president, and unfortunately, voters judge by the complete record. And already the complete record is lagging.
Just what the administration plans to counter all this with is not yet clear, but we could get some indication of what is under consideration at the White House when Treasury Secretary Nicholas Brady is our guest tomorrow on the CBS News broadcast Face the Nation. Former mayor of Washington, D.C., Marion Barry, today began serving a 6-month sentence for cocaine possession. Earlier at a news conference at his home, he told reporters he was emotionally and spiritually prepared to begin serving his time at the federal prison in Petersburg, Virginia. The Senate is set to vote this coming week on the new civil rights bill. It is a measure that's taken on added importance to President Bush in recent days, and Bruce Morton has some thoughts on that tonight in his commentary.
President Bush has decided to sign the civil rights bill, announcing that it isn't a quota bill anymore. You can argue about who gave way on this, but the president gains one clear political advantage. He can say, I'm for this bill. David Duke, of course, cannot. Duke, the ex-Klan wizard and American Nazi who's running for governor of Louisiana, is an embarrassment to the National Republican Party because he keeps saying, hey guys, I'm just like you are. They keep saying you are not either. In some ways, Duke's right. The nature of the Republican Party changed sharply starting in 1964 when Barry Goldwater's ideological conservatives, true believers, took the party away from the Eastern establishment bankers, Rockefellers and the like, who had been running it. The new leaders saw a valuable trade-off, appeal to Southern whites even if it meant driving away black voters. There were, after all, more whites. So Republicans were against busing, denounced set-asides, anything that might be read as a racial quota, minority hiring goals, and the like. Remember the Jesse Helms ad last time, the better qualified white who didn't get the job? Remember Willie Horton? The plan worked because race is a hot-button issue in American politics and because it disrupted the natural democratic alliance of have-nots, regardless of color, against haves. David Duke exploits those Republican resentments. By signing the Civil Rights Bill, President Bush put some distance between them. Bruce Morton, CBS News, Washington.
One of rock and roll's most influential concert promoters has died in a helicopter crash. Bill Graham was one of 3 people killed in the crash last night in Sonoma County, California. In a career that spanned 3 decades, Graham organized concerts that featured the biggest names in rock music. Here's a sign of the times. In Beverly Hills, they're trading in some of the trappings of the good life for much-needed cash. Jerry Boyne.
To your personal list of leading economic indicators, add the name Tall Schmargel, Beverly Hills pawnbroker extraordinaire.
We see a lot of stockbrokers right now coming into, a lot of real estate agents. A lot of real estate agents, yes.
Tall Schmargel's place is where the rich and chagrined come to hawk their Rolls Royces, baby grand pianos, and family jewels. And each person who walks through the door is an indicator of who's down and out in Beverly Hills.
In the last month, we see a very, very big change. Most of our customers right now are business people. Actually, one of the people that own the building behind us there, we have his Rolex.
Amazing as it may seem, even in the land of conspicuous consumption, home of palm trees and perpetual sun, there is a cloud over the economy.